Hello, everyone. We're treating you to yet another episode of Enter the Matrix Road to WTC. This time, we'll be touching upon the team Germany that was requested a lot in the comments and on the Discord channels. And I've got Nathan with me. How are you doing, man?
Hi guys, nice to have you. Nice to have me again. Thanks.
It's okay.
Long day.
Yeah. You got a lot of time to run with the dog, so it makes sense. Like you can be tired. So I think let's get straight to it. Even though people were saying like they have weird armies, I think when I went through their lists before we get to their specific lists, I think they are not as interesting as those two teams that we mentioned before. I think USA and Aussies actually have slightly more interesting lists, at least for me, because those seemed like cookie cutter armies, but with some interesting choices, but not like completely wild out there lists that have completely other approach. So let's start. You want to start, Nathan?
Yeah, so this is more of an interesting one. It goes less down. Oh, it's a shame we're talking about custodes plus agents for those listening in. So the list is 2 Blade Champions, 2 Alaris Captain, Trajan, 5 units of 4 Shield Guard with Spear, 2 units of 3 Alaris, and a Calidus Assassin. So this is the more MSU version, I guess. Whereas normally you would see some blocks of Wardens, some blocks of Guard, so the big units of Guard. Whereas this has got, 5 units with 5 characters and 2 units of Terminators with an Assassin knocking around. Usual kind of 2 Captains for 3 strats and some other things, 2 Blade Champions for 2 advancing charges, Trajan for just ignoring all the modifiers. So pretty standard if you're going to take 5 characters. That sounds about right. The 4-man units with Spears Guard, there's a bit of a what you take with Custodes sometimes. Do you take the more offensive Shield Guard, who are cheaper, or do you take the Wardens, who tend to just survive a lot longer with the -1 to wound and the 1 use only feel no pain pop?
There's one thing though about 5x4 Shield Guard that I find interesting, that they didn't opt to take any single guy with a Storm Shield, or however the shield is called in Custodes.
Oh, they're all spears.
Yeah, they are all spears, so there is no one guy with 4 wounds, where I think having one guy with 4 wounds sometimes is very useful, depending what you face.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, just even having just one, there's still a fair amount of 3 damage weapon. It's not that common that you always get into combat with your entire squad anyway, so probably one's going to die anyway. Might as well make it a little bit more difficult to kill. So yeah, normally, but for 10, it's normally like 2 and 8 or 3 and 7.
Yes, one has Vexilla and maybe 1 and 2.
Yeah,
other guys have it. So the other thing that's interesting in this list, every single unit except Calidus actually has rerolls to wound against something. Alaris has against vehicles, monsters, and characters, and Shield Guard has was on an objective.
Yeah.
So there's actually like a force multiplier included in there. So I think this is more of a defensive approach to Custodes.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah.
Something more about holding objectives, etc. Maybe 3-man Alaris squads are actually meant for those OC breakpoints sometimes, that you actually have 6 OC from 3 Alaris.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't even be surprised if sometimes one of the Alaris would have a captain included in them, depending on the matchup. You do not necessarily have to have all of them in Shield Guard, in my opinion at least. So I find this list being like quite straightforward. You don't need as much of an agent support if you have so many units. Although I'm curious what is the reasoning, except what I just mentioned, for 2x3 Alaris instead of 3x2, to have even more teleportation options. You already have one with Calidus, with the Alaris doing that innately, but there must be a reasoning why you take a third guy in a unit instead of 3x2. Do you have any idea why it might be so? Or
like I said, the only thing I can think of is the 6OC. Yeah, I would normally have seen 222 because it's a little
Maybe
bit.
there's like mathematical breakpoint of killing chaff on the marker as well. Like 3 guys can actually kill enough of, say, regular Marines. Yeah, something like that, that they just kill enough to always take away a marker or something like that.
Do the Shield Guard have Vexillas in as well?
No, they do not have Vexillas in.
No.
Because
It's
Vexilla
interesting.
also takes away spears. So, like...
Yes, you lose the combat weapon for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you lose. So interesting, the 4 with a character.
That's 10 OC.
10's not. It doesn't mean you're always going to take an objective. So you might not always get the reroll to wounds. And maybe the squad size is an interesting one sometimes. So say, for example, a knight or a wraith knight, you're not controlling that objective, are you?
I mean, against regular War Dog you control, but yeah.
War Dog, yeah. But like a wraith knight, you're not going to get full rerolls to wound.
Yeah.
Probably not. Granted, you're -1 damage anyway, so you're not doing a lot anyway. But yeah. But yeah, like you say, this seems a lot more put forwardy, more MSU, but still quite tanky.
Yeah. When I'm not really sure whether I like put forward Custodes without one squad that can actually kill something tough.
Yes, yeah.
But
a lot
that's
of
my
pointed
opinion.
characters.
Yeah.
A lot of pointed
which do not necessarily force multiply as well as much.
No, not always.
Okay, moving forward. We have Thousand Suns. This is a rather regular list. Arne came out with a list that's very similar to what is played by Vic. There's Ahriman on a disc, 3 Exalted Sorcerers on discs, 3 Infernal Masters, Magnus, Sorcerer, regular Sorcerer, 6 squads of rubrics. 2 of them have only Flamers and Reapers, 4 of them have Bolters and Reapers, 1 Vortex Beast, and 1 Rhino. So it has less Rhinos than what Vic plays and a little bit more rubrics. So
yeah.
I'm interested by the choice of 3 Exalteds. That's something that we were talking in previous episode where we're about you guys actually dropping from 3 to 2.
Yes.
So like there's, I think, law of diminishing returns when it comes to halving movement of opponent units. That sometimes it will not be as powerful. Obviously, that rule is really, really good. Like you cannot discredit it. But
especially because you can double move them back, both of them. So that's where I think Vic got to, where I think he did try 3, but then if only 2 are realistically coming back again, the third maybe doesn't, unless you're throwing one away to do that and then do an action maybe, but then again you're wasting kind of points a little bit. Vic has a second Rhino just because it makes it a little bit easier for table choices and everything else.
And more chaff from what I recall.
Yes, yeah, he's got 6 units of 5. I think Vic only has 5 units of 5, so I don't quite remember what the exact difference is. Oh, ours has got demons.
Yeah,
that's what it is. But yeah, it's really, really tricksy. It plays into the player skill aspect more than even say more like the blocky Thousand Suns list.
At least for me, in this edition, at this point of time, Thousand Suns are the coolest army to play.
100%.
When it comes to tricks, actual choices on the board, and feeling like you won the game because of your choices and decisions when you're playing the army, instead of winning the game by just the sake of playing Eldar, say.
Yes, because it's actually quite a fragile army in some aspects. So it ends up being quite a lot of the time you have to pick your battles very carefully. If you let a Thousand Suns player let them gang up on your units, they can knock them down, and you just start snowballing and losing the grip on the game. Whereas if you drip feed them a little bit, if you want to play for a draw versus Thousand Suns, sometimes you can. So it's just how you play into them. Sometimes it's quite difficult. But then you've still got the slowing you down, so it's difficult for you to play your objective game as easily. You've got Magnus is still a big punch. Sorcerer makes things difficult to shoot. Rubrics are still really good damage output. Infernal Masters are fantastic. I'd imagine he has one of those. I'd imagine he's
With
got
Vortex.
abilities on all these. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Araman on a disc is an interesting choice. They obviously still haven't FAQ'd that a character on a disc can't go in a Rhino, which is stupid because it's just got
Or
the
in
infantry
Sisters, you have
Yeah.
Junif Erudita in the Rhino. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course it does. But they said Big G couldn't go in a white truck. But anyway, so Araman on the disc is an interesting one. It is more useful because it gets to jump around and it makes its ability more useful to get to and things. And there's not really any points difference. But it does make you shootable over the ruins that we use on small ruins. So there's ups and downs of taking Araman on a disc.
Yeah, but if he's not within the ruin, behind the ruin, and like you're using coherency to be the units be fine, it can be fine because he can join the regular rubrics even if he's on disc.
Yeah.
Right. So like you can still work around it, and being like if you are smart about it. So it's not necessarily that bad.
For sure.
Cool. I think we've touched upon TS a lot in a previous episode. I think this is another army that sometimes when we are talking about this edition and how certain armies perform, killing Magnus in a turn when he's pushing you is another kind of a stat check that certain armies need to be able to just fulfill, because otherwise they will be very punished for not being able to handle it. So yeah. Moving forward. So another list that's not really surprising, right?
No.
We've got the regular GSC with Biophagus with Infiltration, who will be joining 10 Aberrants, Clamavus, 2 Nexuses, 3 Primuses, 2 Saboteurs, 1 with Vect, 10, 10, 10, 5 Demolition Charges Hybrids, 3 times 20 Seismic Neophytes, and 1 Mortar Ridge Runner.
Yeah.
Is there much to Yeah.
Yeah.
Just Abbeys, regular,
the same as the last two teams.
Yeah. So now Aussies do not have aberrants, but like everything we said about USA and Aussies actually will translate to this army. So I would much rather not get too deep into it, because I think we said everything about this army till this point. So if you want to hear more about it, watch or listen to the previous episodes, because we touch more on GSC there.
For sure.
But now for a spicy take. You want to take those big boys?
So yeah, I'm actually glad Demons. Again, I was glad yesterday when Australia had Chaos Knights, and I'm glad that Demons are in the German team, one of the top teams. So we got Be'lakor, Thirster with the King of Blades, so he can kill things. Chaos Fateweaver, Lord of Change with an Everstave, again, so he actually does some damage. Shalaxi, Blue Scribes, Changeling, 3 Nurglings, 6 Flamers, and 3 Flamers. So it's basically Monster Mash. It's kind of role in pairings has always been a bit of an interesting one, because it's not terrible at scoring, but you are going to get to a point where sometimes your chaff dies. If your lone operatives in the Blue Scribes and Changeling aren't able to get certain things, you're probably going to have to do cards with a monster at some point. The kind of issue that Demons have a little bit is they pay for the invuln tax and they pay for the combat tax, which is in 10th now. So a lot of the time they don't always trade up. Like Shalaxi is phenomenal in combat, but she's 400 points. So if she gets to hit something powerful, great. But if she doesn't, she can trade down sometimes, which is not ideal. But the list has a ton of tricks. It's a little bit of that GK list that we talked about with the US team. But you've been able to pick up monsters, move Be'lakor over, deep strike the monster 6 inches away from him, so you can have a 6-inch charge against other people. Being able to tag objectives with, say, Keros. He taps an objective, and basically, if it's the first couple of turns, roll a d6 and you basically get your CP back. So the objectives are sticky, things like that. This doesn't have the Blood Crusher bomb in it, which I quite like, but again, it's just monster heavy. Lords of Change, for their points are ridiculously good for 230 points. They just have a little bit of, they don't do quite enough damage.
If tagged in melee, they suddenly do nothing about it.
Yeah, they do absolutely nothing. Yeah, so they're pretty good. Walk around, do scoring, those kind of things. But yeah, I do really like Demons. They just kind of struggle sometimes. They're good into like static gun lines. If you want to play guard,
Yeah.
very good at drawing with guard, because if you walk into it, it's going to out combat you, and then it just sits within Bellicor range, and you just go, oh, okay, I can't shoot you with anything.
Yeah.
But other than
If
that,
you remember Belacor being tough and nearly unkillable previous edition, you should never even try to look at the new one because it will make you very sad.
No. What he used to be in toughness, he now gives to the rest of the army. From hopefully not
Yeah,
being
I remember seeing one game where like Carnivore killed him in one close combat, and like that can happen actually. So he's not what he was before.
No, my first game of 10th was with Demon Monster Mash because I saw Lords of Change. I'm like, oh, cool. Flying Circles is back again. And I charged Bellicor into Canis and did like 10 wounds to him, and then Bellicor died. I was like, okay. Okay, maybe 10th is a bit different now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a fun list. And I know the player who's playing this list plays pretty much predominantly only Demons. And he's a very, very good player with it. So I still expect him to do quite well. You could probably prey on some things with this, especially if people haven't played into Demons. And it's a little bit like we were talking about in a previous episode where is it diminishing returns if everybody else has Necrons, GSC, Eldar, whatever that you need to play into? Do you then devote time to learning to play Demons when half the teams don't have it? Especially being able to play a game against a high enough quality Demon player like this.
Yeah. This army has a lot of tricks. Similar case like with Grey Knights, right?
Yeah.
Do you devote your testing games into those armies?
Yes.
Which exactly. I'm not yet sure. So if you were to say what this army can counter except like say Guard or other shitty armies, what would be your guess? Because I actually struggle to find an answer to that question.
Yeah, because you don't really out-combat and you definitely don't outscore Custodes. The Thirst is kind of decent, and Shalaxi's decent, because at least if a Custode unit has a character in it, they get character keyword, Shalaxi gets full reels to hit, full reels to wound, and then the -1 attack. But she doesn't have fight first, and the Custodes have fight first, and she doesn't have -1 damage. So it's still like, yeah, you lose an attack, but yeah, you might still half die trying to do it. She got fellow pain as well, I guess, which is good. Yeah, Deathwatch, kind of scary shooting. Picks up all your little stuff. Your monsters then have to do half your scoring, and you don't want to stick a Bloodthirst to your primary.
And big Thunder Hammers with Wolf of Moments are still good into it.
Yeah, if Thirsters or Shalaxi had the ability to walk into 10 Marines and just go take them all off, then yeah, I'd be like, okay, Demons, these monsters gonna, but yeah.
But usually they will kill enough so the 4 Thunder Hammers will strike back.
Yeah, and they will probably kill most of you. I'd do like enough trading damage that you then go, okay, well then the unit dies, but you've killed one veteran squad for 200 points, and I've killed a 300-400 point monster, and then it's like, okay. It's pretty drawy because some armies just can't interact with it shooting, but yeah, matrix wise, Eldar's not great. GSC's awful.
Oh yes.
Yeah, GSC just has a field day with this. Necrons might be a bit drawy, but you probably don't have enough to. Do you have enough to kill the blocks?
I don't think you
do. Probably not there.
Yeah, like first attacks maybe kills Cryptofrolls. If it does, then resurrecting Cryptofrolls, and then suddenly it's like.
Yeah, and Shalaxi's great because she has precision, but in this edition, you just stick all your characters behind a wall, and then it's just like, oh, you can't target. It's like, well, that's a great rule. There's such a stupid rule.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Like
It's
you epic challenge, and the dude says, "No, I'm sorry, the door's closed. No, not gonna happen."
just stands behind a wall and he's like, not here. So yeah, pairings, not quite sure what this list is. It's difficult to push into. Like if the demons get to pick their charges on their terms because they're not getting shot up as much. But then again, they eventually do have to walk into the centers to actually score points and cards because 32 of the 50 odd points for secondaries are in the center of the board predominantly. So then it becomes a case of you're probably stepping in 18 inches. And Be'lakor can't protect everybody all of the time. Otherwise, you just have a mob of monsters just on one objective.
Which on some missions might happen, like the very first one.
Yes, yeah. So sometimes it's great, but I'd be interested to see how well this list does.
Yeah, I'm like genuinely curious what is the role in the pairings for this army. Because I don't immediately see it, and I spent some time trying to figure it out whilst on a walk today, and I just couldn't. So maybe there's something we're missing. I hope so.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
Yeah, I think knits you can push from the board, but not like the horde knits. Horde knits are like, yeah, cool.
Cool, you killed half a gargoyle unit. It's 6 back. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, interesting. Rooting for it, though. Rooting for
it. Then another army, which I don't think is that different. So we've got Deathwatch, which doesn't have Grandmaster, but it has Captain with the Tome of Second Oath of Moments. Phobos Librarian with Thief of Secrets, which I remember is the better close combat if you're in kill something. Then you have 10-10, 5-5-5-5 Deathwatch vet for a total 40 vets in 6 squads. 10 Desos, 2x3 Eradicators, 2x5 Infiltrators, Landspeeder, and Repulsor. So there is some plan with Repulsor and playing units within the transport. But other than that, is there like something standing out in this take of Deathwatch except that it has 10 more Deathwatch vets compared to other armies and it has no Inceptors?
Yeah, so it's the Repulsor is an interesting choice. Like the Repulsor for me would be like an obvious choice if you could put Desos in it, but they can't because they have the wrong keyword, don't they?
That's something that I'll check. But what stood out to me is actually not having any Inceptors.
Yes, which just obvious little scoring.
Yeah, because rapid ingressing 3 inches away is very, very powerful.
Yeah, like we originally got rid of them, but then it was kind of a case of because they are expensive. They are expensive. What, 3 for 135 points? They're not cheap.
115, I think.
115, sorry. But then again, they're usually getting you 4 to 10 points a game just through secondary cards, sniping lone operatives potentially, or just adding that turn where you have to push, just dropping in 2 units. And then also having units that can deep strike 3 really messes with people's game plans. Like dropping 3, if you're lazy and you don't put something good on an objective and he kills a character on an objective, he's now taking your home objective, which in certain missions or if you get the card is a load of points.
To clarify, yes, the Desolators can ride in the Repulsor.
Oh, they can they? Okay.
Yeah. So I can see this being played in like some like mirrors, for example, being a nice tag, and like the Repulsor itself also has like decent damage output. You can't scoff at it. So it can also be used to like transport Deathwatch vets into frontline as well with like 2x5 in it, or even like 2x5 and you rapid ingress it from outflank, etc. So there's some play. I'm interested like about Eradicators.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice.
And like the lack of Inceptors is really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, from a scoring perspective, the Inceptors just
because like
kind of needed
regular Deathwatch list, you could see in this case swapping 2x5 Deathwatch vets into 2x3 Inceptors, and that's kind of your cookie cutter Deathwatch. There are some like choices you guys have. Hellblasters instead of Repulsor and Landspeeder. And this is another list which doesn't have Thunderfire Cannon, which can also be impactful in certain matchups because that's slow. In a meta that has surprisingly a lot of blobs, can be quite useful.
Yeah, definitely move that way. Yeah, pretty standard.
And I think it went a little bit less with not taking Inceptors. It is less tailored into countering GSC, which I think a lot of Deathwatch lists might have went too far, and that matchup will never happen anyway. Like, if you have as a GSC one matchup that you usually lose, that one is never happening. So I think over tailoring into that matchup is just straight up wrong. You want to make sure it's good enough for you that you win it consistently, so that matchup just opponent will avoid, so it messes your pairings a little bit, but you want to make sure that this army will also play into other things, which I think they've done quite well, but I don't necessarily think that dropping Inceptors is actually that impactful into GSC matchup. You still need all those Deathwatch vets to actually push the board and push away the GSC army.
Yeah, he's kind of just the Deathwatch versus GSC is still an interesting one, because if you overtech it, you just never play it. So now you, like you say, you've kind of got some not wasted points, but you have units that are maybe less effective. But if you don't tech into it quite enough, GSC can actually start drawing that game potentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, this has kind of covered all its bases pretty well.
Yeah, I think Phobos Librarian with 5 Infiltrators is just the base for playing against GSC.
It's just also just really good. Like, we even looked at taking 2 Phobos Libbies with 2 Infiltrators.
Yeah,
it seemed a bit extreme.
I can see that.
But it is like, you play any kind of gunline against the Guard matchup, against some other matchups, or even the Eldar matchups, if it gets you another 5-10 points a game, just because you've got your 2 outfield, 2 furthest away objectives from them, just being that I've got 2 pretty solid lone operative units, it gets you points. But,
and those lone operative units can actually kill other chaff, because Librarians, Smite with Oaths, etc., they can sometimes hold their own. So
yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Then I think this is not the wildest Craftworlds we've seen. Maybe you want to walk us through it?
So this is an interesting one that actually came up quite early on with the Eldar. So he's got an Autarch, Avatar of Cain, Young Khan, Farseer, Illic, Spirit Seer, 3 Fire Prisms, a unit of 5 Rangers, single D cannon, 3 Voids with Prisms, a single Viper, and then a 5-man Wraith Guard unit. So no Wraith Knight.
And only 5 Wraith Guard.
Yes. Is he the only Eldar player who didn't take a Wraith Knight? Can't be the only one.
I would imagine someone else also didn't take one.
Yeah.
But still, this is more of a MSU approach, if anything, with like some choices like Illic with Rangers for the, again, low NOP squad that can shoot with snipers, and 2 avatars for like that resiliency on markers, because they are still good, but there's no Night Spinner.
No.
Again.
They are expensive, but Young Khans and a Night Spinner are a fantastic combination. I think there's another team who's got 3 Night Spinners with a Young Khan, which might be a bit excessive, but it's, just having a little bit more indirect than 1 D cannon would be nice, because as we've seen from some of these tables, it's quite difficult to get fire lanes. Fly is not as amazing it was in Night. You don't actually get line of sight for prisms. Voids are pretty good at getting angles and stuff.
400 points in Eldar with like all the rerolls, they are solid.
Still really good. But I think so the Avatar is probably going to have to do a lot of primary holding, because he's just very, very tough to kill. Halving damage is just because, of course, they gave half damage. They gave -1 damage and loads of invuns to most of the Eldar stuff. And then the 2 things that have half damage in the Eldar list, even though it's a dying race army somehow, the still most survivable. So yeah, the Avatar is going to be doing a lot of primary, I'd imagine, holding, especially center, those kind of things.
Yeah. I
There's
can
also
see
avatars.
it being Phantasm turned one, pushing forward and just going at it.
Yeah. Like, I absolutely love the Avatar. Like, I've just painted Josh's and he's using it at an event this weekend. And, like, it's just being able to use fake dice for charges means that you're basically anything 19 inches away, you get to charge it automatically. Just using a 6 for its Overwatch, so it gets basically 2 to 4 hits. A monster melter gun. Again, it's great. Good in combat, halves damage, not that expensive. But yeah, having no Wraith Knight is an interesting one because it kind of felt like the Wraith Knight was a big counter for GSC because this doesn't have any.
I think a lot of armies cannot handle Wraith Knight with its clapback.
True.
Like, if you don't kill it fully, suddenly you are in a lot of trouble because everything got exposed.
And the amount of overwatching damage.
And it is the best Overwatch in the game, I would say.
Yeah, it's dumb. Interestingly, this might struggle more with, say, GSC because it doesn't have any spiders and doesn't have any what are the shadow ones called again?
Spectres,
thank you. But I can definitely see it might actually be a better put forward in some ways, although arguably the other Eldar
do you really want to do it with Eldar?
Yeah, exactly. So there's better armies. But no, it's definitely a cool list. I'd be interested to see how this does without the Wraith Knight and only a small Wraith Guard block. Obviously scores very well. It's lots of fast things. Young Khan's just amazing. She won't work in about 6 months probably.
Yeah. Let's enjoy while she's broken.
100%, yeah.
But she is like fun broken, I would say. Like she's
yes.
Like I actually find her interactions throughout the editions that she was playable the most fun model I've played with because of the level of fuckery you can employ is just out of this world. And so, and there are like weird interactions that I always love with Incarn. If you have Wraith Knight, there is no Wraith Knight, but killing something in Overwatch so you can fly, run away, etc. So there's, but I think as we spoke in previous episodes, having Eldar, I don't think lists matter that much because they are still obnoxiously good.
Yes, yeah.
And there are like potatoes. I think there might be choices for specific matchups. I think Wraith Knights are still broken. But
this is probably what. Sorry,
no, go on.
This is probably what Eldar's going to look like in 6 months. they're so ahead of the meta that this will be like, oh, this is actually the more balanced, more tame kind of Eldar list.
Although the lore part of the list I hate it, the fact that there are 2 avatars in one list, but it might be only me. Yeah. We're a competitive podcast. Let's not delve into lore much. Then a quick list, and I want to correct myself from the previous episode. I only today read up on the Chaos Knights and that their Meltas actually have strength 12. So I was convinced they had like lower strength as other factions have. So okay, they are slightly better, although they are really random still. But having Melta 4 and 2 shots on strength 12 and AP 4 is actually something really good. So you can see in this list they actually have 14 Dragon Breath Spears, or however they are called, or Demon Breath Spears. So yeah, it's a list that just decided, we don't like carnivores as much. Let's just bring more Meltas into the list and have more Stalkers so we can give out more Assassinate.
That's the concern I would have with this list is you go, I'm basically going to get 12 for bring it. If you can kill Baby Knights, you're going to get, 30? You're going to get 20 for bring it down, and you get 4 points for every character. So it then becomes a case of I could get 36 by killing 4 Stalkers and 3 guys.
Yeah, and if they play them defensively, so if you bring like the previous list Aussies brought with only 2 stalkers, I was like more okay with it because I think then that second mission might not be as good if you are going to play fixed, and I think playing fixed against Chaos Knights is very tempting. So yeah, that's something that I just find off, because if you want to play defensively with stalkers, sure, they will be holding the backfield objectives at the same time, but if opponent kills like 3 of them, getting 32 points from secondaries still is, I think, around average you get if you have good tactical army, I would say, against an army that you can score tacticals, because sometimes certain armies are very good at denying you tactical missions. But yeah.
So you could argue there's maybe sometimes taking fixed against this army, if you're not amazing at killing knights or digging knights out of terrain, it could be a bit of a trap, because he sticks four stalkers behind a wall, and in a lot of the missions where you only have to sit on 2 objectives because it's 10 points, he just maybe sits one out.
You put 1 huntsman, 1 brigand on each, and just chill your turn, man.
And then just reserve the rest. Then you just go, okay, the Chaos Knight player might not get a ton of card points, might get 20 maybe, but if he's denied you most of your killed vehicles and most of your things, if he keeps you to 10 or something like that, I could see it. You could end up being in a trap situation where the Chaos Knight army picks a really heavy table and just goes, cool, all right.
I'm forcing you to actually play your hand.
Yeah, because I've got move through terrain, so I can hide most. If I can hide most of my stuff, reserve the rest, and just plonk one out to do a card every so often that isn't a character.
And this list actually surprisingly well hides on the board.
It does.
Like, if you haven't played Chaos Knights, I was like thinking when I was playing that army first with like 13 baby knights, it would be hard to hide them. Surprisingly, that's not as much of a case.
No, it's not too bad. And this one with 14s, to be honest, isn't even that bad either. Yeah. But then again, it still can go the other way. You kill some characters.
The only thing is you can reserve at most 3 knights because of the point limits. So like you cannot do as much with it because they do not have deep strike.
No.
So yeah, I don't think there's. Is there like a thing that Chaos Knights can counter? I can see it like being played into guard, say, as a defender on heavy table, but as a defender on a heavy table, if you see 1 Wraith Knight, you just cry.
Like unless he lets his Wraith Knight be ganged up on, because I don't know if it's a general rule or it's the way the WTC's ruled it. Melter's quite nice, where Melter's unaffected by modifiers. So
yeah, it is rules as written, by the way. So Meltas do not add the damage profile. It's just 4 more wounds effectively. I don't remember the correct wording. So for anyone listening, if you have a rule that says 0 damage, like Ghost Kill Scan from their drone or Magnus, you still take the Melta damage.
Yeah.
So
it's a weird one.
Yeah, I think that should be FAQ. Like that seems like weird and an interaction that's just missed by how they worded stuff.
Yeah. Or like even say we were just talking about Young Khan and Avatar, they go, right, halve the D6 plus 4. Like, okay, interesting. But so Melters, if you get in short range, is quite good. Yeah, what's this really preying on? This version has very little combat. Like it's got 8 combat weapons, but
4 attacks at most per model.
Yeah.
Hitting on 3s.
Yeah, the stalkers sometimes get +1 to wound if you're able to shoot the thing that was next to the thing that you're actually punching. But yeah, 4 attacks hitting on 3s, not fantastic. I played a couple of games and it kind of went okay versus GSC. If you went first, you can cover the board and stop them scoring.
You just push.
Yeah, you just kind of push enough, but eventually you can't block everywhere, and then they just start knocking knights down. You might get 7 or 8 if you're lucky, but yeah, it's one of those lists where it maybe isn't smashing a lot of things, but unless you're like an Eldar and you're very good at killing tanks, it's also quite difficult some armies to kill. Like this smashes guard, especially if it goes first, because they're sat in a corner and it's just too much mech. There's like it can do well into nids because obviously it has a lot of indirect. This one has 10 still, presumably.
And it can win the shooting fight.
Yeah, you knock down monsters with Melter. You can get 6 brigands, pick up gaunts and things. But again, it struggles with lone operatives.
Yeah.
Because with no combat, running 6 brigands sometimes, yeah, unless you're...
Yeah, and even like charging with Stalker on or a Huntsman into Lictor, you are not really sure you can kill it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Probably not, to be honest with him. But,
yeah.
But it's very, very good at primary. Like, it's very good at just... If I just go aggressive and push, I can take a lot of people off primary. So I'm glad it's there, and I'm interested to see how well it does. But it was an interesting one to see.
Yeah, I think it's at some point a defender that's meant to pull out Eldar and something.
Yes, yeah.
And this is an army that might not actually have the best scores, for example, for Germans or Aussies, because it will just get preyed by Eldar. Because if it's attacked by Eldar and something else that just kills those knights, say like Custodies, you're like, cool, we can handle Custodies later, but we cannot handle Eldar later.
Yes.
Take this one, boy.
Like, I did actually find this list that when I played with Chaos Knights, too bad at killing Custodes, because a lot of the time the objectives in the open, well, if depending on board choice, there's quite a few times where the objectives are kind of in the open, but it's still like I have to put my whole army to kill one block, and then even then,
cool.
If they feel the pain, it's less likely that you kill a whole block. But yes, I know what you mean.
And sometimes even like having Trajan survive with one guy, getting reroll wounds kills a knight on the marker, and you cannot do anything about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you just start losing too much, and the attrition war goes against you.
It's good into Deathwatch. This is good into Deathwatch. Like it.
I think in general, knights are decent into Deathwatch.
Yes, yeah, that's what we kind of found, where it's just like, okay, yeah, they just don't have enough anti-tank to really deal with.
But it can be swingy, like it kind of depends on the Dessos direct shooting.
Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah.
And it can be swingy because it's only 10 shots, etc. So
for sure,
wounding on force, it's not something reliable.
No, for sure.
Anyway, let's move forward, and we've got Necrons, and that's the final list that they've got. So this is another cookie cutter army, but with a completely different take within it. So we've got 3 hex marks. I think one of the best lone operatives in the game, by the way.
Definitely, yeah, they're amazing.
With resurrection and stuff, if I remember, they can resurrect, so this is a pain in the ass to actually handle. Although Necron resurrection happens immediately, so you need to know about it. Like, for example, if you have precision attacks like with Shalaxi, and that model is not hidden, you can kill a character. It immediately needs to go get back in the midst of your attack process. So the remaining attacks kill the character as well again.
Nice.
So there are like those small interactions with warding. I think Necrons are the only resurrection that happens at the same, like immediately. Every other resurrection happens at the end of the phase. But anyway, there's 3 hex mark, Lord with stealth, Nemesor, which gives buffs to shooting. If you do not know, either lethal, sustain, or dev wounds. It's random. Orican the Diviner, and also Nemesor has Vect. Orican the Diviner, so 4-up Invul for his unit. Technomancer with Veil, 3 Transctan, 1 with 4-up Feel No Pain, 20 Warriors with Reapers. That will probably have Orican and Technomancer in it, I would wager.
Yeah, probably.
No, they are both Cryptex, actually. You cannot have both of them. So you probably have Orican and one of the Lords with the Warriors and the other ones with Lichguard. So I would say Orican and Nemesor with Warriors, Lord and Technomancer with Lichguard. and you have Reanimator and 2x2 Trolls that join the Necrons. I mean the big blobs. So this army, what do you think about this build?
So it's kind of along the same lines as a lot of the others. It's kind of 2 massive blocks, tons of characters, multiple satans.
3 tons.
Yeah, this one's got 3 tons. Well, I guess Liam's had 2, but yeah, this one's got 3.
Which are probably there to do secondaries because they can teleport around and actually do the missions.
They're just bouncing around the whole time, which again is Necron's kind of weakest aspect, is they are slow at the moment. So it was always difficult where I think a lot of the Necron armies looked initially at taking loads of damage output because you could put it with Doomsday Arcs and Destroyers and things like that. But then the problem was it was like the terrain doesn't help, and then okay, well, actually the list is too slow at scoring cards, so they end up turning into like these very unkillable blocks. And I imagine it does similar things in pairings to the previous 2 that we discussed. But yeah, it's just if you can't put these units down in one go, they're just going to come back with a vengeance and just keep scoring and scoring and scoring, or denying you scoring.
Lich Guard are better into some armies, while Warriors are better into others. So
yes.
I'm not like a very against playing 1-1.
No,
because
no,
then you can play differently on the board depending on the matchup on the where you're playing. Sometimes with this list you cannot take Veil in Warriors. I'll double check it, but I'm pretty sure that only 1 Cryptek and 1 Lord, because that would make sense lore wise as well.
Yeah.
So let me check that one so I'm not saying bullshit. And how would you pair it then?
Again, it seems like a lot of the Necron list because it doesn't necessarily have the ability to push differential as much with its scoring. It does seem like one of those lists that will just kind of get points out of anything. It still struggles with Eldar, it still struggles with GSC. But again, it can survive a little bit against GSC more than most things. So yeah, I would feel it's one of those. It's a very solid put forward that not a lot of armies want to go, well, what
if it takes away Eldar or GSC as you're put forward, you're completely fine with it. Because something
as
has
long
to.
as you feel it's going to get at least some points, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there's no point taking Eldar out if you get 1 or 2 points. Like, because an Eldar player will go, I still took 18. Obviously, the perfect strategy for Matrix is your Eldar army gets 17-3 against one of their top armies. That might be the difference in some rounds. But yeah, Necrons, like you say, they're either playing something for a draw and using up one of your put forwards, or they are taking out one of the worst matchups and freeing up the Matrix for everybody else later. Which, considering 10th now has 2 of the most oppressive armies we've seen at WTCs in the last 10 years, maybe, it does feel like actually that's not an awful thing anymore. Because the Matrixes do seem a little bit more, I've got a couple of good matchups, a couple of bad matchups, and then 2 awful matchups versus Eldar and GSC, which just seem to be relatively unavoidable for most armies now. Making the put forward job quite difficult this year, I think. It'll be interesting to see how teams will get over that.
Yeah, that's not easy thing to solve. So how do you like the team composition overall? Because people were saying like this is something out there, and I don't really feel like it's out there. There are some choices, but it's
like
solid.
What key armies do we normally see that they didn't take? They took Thousand Suns, they took Custodes.
Yeah, they took GSC, Eldar. They do not have CSM, but I can see we also didn't take CSM, which I think like it depends how the army performed in your testing, right?
Yeah.
So
what they took CK and Demons. they're maybe the only two that you would look at and go, oh, they're an interesting choice. But other than that, they took pretty much all what we would consider the top armies. What's the other? There's a top army we've missed. Oh, there isn't. No, there's usually it's those two. Usually there's like kind of a basic 6, and then you pick a couple choice.
Yeah.
Points. So, yeah.
So everything seems like a decent choice. I don't necessarily think that they've made choices that are out there. So
No.
it seems solid. Like, we definitely, as Poland and England, value Raid Guard way more than MSU.
For sure.
But
yeah.
That's just our thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
Anything else to add?
No. Again, I love the German guys. They're fantastic. I hope they do well this year. And it'd be interesting to see how some of the more interesting. I'm interested to see how the Demon list does. I'm interested to see how the 14 Baby Knight CK list does. And I'm interested to see how the non-Wraith Knight Eldar list does also from Demons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a few choices that I'm curious about. So we'll see how it performs. And we'll probably try to record another one of those tomorrow, I guess.
Yeah, sounds good.
So if you have any other remaining team that you wanna us to actually cover, please tell us so in the comments. We might, because we need to figure something out if we're not taking England and Poland. And
yes, yeah.
I don't really like. We can always cover France because they also have interesting lists. I think, and also it's not. If we were to cover like Spain, you guys already have them in your pod, so I don't think we want to cover armies that are not armies, but teams that might spoil some of our preparation as well. So
yes, I would probably get a very unwelcome text from the England captain to be like, stop telling Spain what we're planning to do. But yeah.
I already got some comments like that from previous episodes for
right, fair enough.
saying some stuff.
Fair enough.
Oh well, that's the life of being a coverage guy, right?
Yeah.
We might not get access next year, boy.
Yeah, that sounds like a you problem, not an us problem.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, thanks for listening. And as I said, if you have any other team that you want us to cover, like the spicy Black Templar French choice, please tell so in the comments. And see you in the next one.
Thanks, guys.